Imagine a website as a massive library filled with endless shelves of information, all neatly organized and waiting to be accessed. In this library, there's a librarian who fetches information for you, but instead of spoken words, they use a special language called SQL, a powerful tool for asking questions and making changes. SQL, or Structured Query Language, is how websites communicate with their databases, retrieving, adding, or changing information behind the scenes every time you interact with a site. But what if you could trick the librarian into giving you more than you asked for, or even letting you into restricted sections? That's the essence of SQL injection. SQL injection happens when an attacker sneaks their own SQL commands into a website's request, exploiting the trust the site has in its own code and the way it handles user input. The website, expecting normal input like a name or password, is fooled into running harmful commands that it never intended to execute. This attack doesn't require brute force or advanced hacking tools, just a clever manipulation of how user input is processed by the website. For example, a login form expects a username and password, trusting that users will enter only what's asked, but an attacker might enter a username with hidden SQL code, cleverly disguised within their input. If the website isn't careful and doesn't check this input, it runs the malicious code, potentially giving the attacker unauthorized access or even full control over the database. It's not about breaking in with force, it's about tricking the system from the inside, using its own logic against itself. Many major data breaches and leaks have started with this simple, yet devastating trick, costing companies millions and exposing sensitive information. Attackers don't need to be geniuses, just knowledgeable about how databases and website logic work and how to exploit their weaknesses. They turn the website's greatest strength, managing and organizing data, into its biggest vulnerability, all with a few lines of code. Understanding how SQL injection works is the first step to defending against it and protecting the valuable data that websites hold. When you create an account on a website, your details, like your username and password, are stored securely in a database. This database acts as the website's memory, keeping track of who you are and what information you've provided. When you log in, the website takes the information you enter and builds an SQL query, using your input to check if your credentials match a record in its database. For example, the website might ask its database, "Find the row where username is John Smith and password is my secret password 123. This is how it checks if you are really who you say you are. If there's a match, you're logged in and granted access to your account. It feels instant, but there's a lot happening behind the scenes. This process happens in the blink of an eye, thousands of times a second, as millions of users log in and interact with websites all over the world. The key point is that the website trusts your input is safe and expected. It assumes you're entering only what's needed, like your username and password. But this trust is exactly what attackers look to exploit. If a website isn't careful, this trust can be used against it. Every time you fill out a form, search for something, or leave a comment, your input is used to build an SQL query behind the scenes. The system assumes you'll only provide normal, harmless information like names, emails, or search terms. But if that assumption is wrong, and someone enters something unexpected or malicious, the door is open for attack. This principle applies to logins, searches, comments. Almost every interaction you have online involves your input being sent to a database. The website is always talking to its database, and your input shapes that conversation every single time you interact with it. That's why input handling and validation are so critical for security, because a website's trust in your input is both its strength and its greatest vulnerability. Attackers see a login form as an opportunity, not a barrier. Instead of a normal username, they enter something like or11. This string is crafted to manipulate the database. The website, trusting the input, inserts it directly into its SQL query. The attacker's input changes the logic of the query, bypassing security checks. The or101 condition always evaluates as true, and tells the database to ignore the rest. The attacker uses SQL syntax to trick the system, not brute force. The real vulnerability? The website's failure to check and clean user input. This blind trust is the open door for attackers. Let's break down how this attack actually works in a real-world scenario, step by step. Normally, when you log in, the website builds a query like select from customers, where username is username and password is password. This query checks if your credentials match a record in the database. For a regular user, entering their username and password works as intended. The system only grants access if both fields are correct. But an attacker enters something different, like OR101. This changes the query to select from customers, where username, OR101, and password. The logic of the query is now completely altered. The OR101 part is always true, so the database returns data for every user, not just the one who should be logging in. The symbols turn the rest of the query into a comment, which means the password check is ignored entirely. The database never even looks at the password. The result, the attacker can log in as the first user in the database, often the administrator or someone with high-level privileges. No password is needed, no brute force attacks, just a cleverly crafted input that tricks the system into letting them in. Now the attacker has access to sensitive data, like customer records, financial information, or even the ability to change or delete data. In some cases, they can take full control of the entire system. The system doesn't crash or show an error. Instead, it's quietly deceived by the malicious input, making the attack hard to detect at first glance. That's the power and the real danger of SQL injection. It's a simple trick, but it can have devastating consequences if left unchecked. Once inside, attackers can steal personal data, names, addresses, passwords. If they gain admin access, they control the entire database. They can download all user information, even encrypted passwords, and try to crack them offline. Stolen data often ends up for sale on the dark web. Attackers can also modify or delete data, changing prices, altering balances, or wiping out records. They might deface the website, damaging the company's reputation. The fallout includes regulatory fines, lawsuits, and loss of customer trust. Rebuilding trust and fixing the damage can take years. The cost of a single SQL injection can threaten the entire business. Prevention is far cheaper than recovery. SQL injection isn't just theory. It's behind some of the biggest cyber heists ever. Heartland Payment Systems lost data on over 130 million cards due to a simple SQL injection. TalkTalk's breach exposed 157,000 customer records, costing millions in fines and lost customers. Sony's PlayStation Network was crippled for weeks after a breach that included SQL injection. These attacks hit major companies, but the vulnerability was basic, failing to handle user input safely. Sometimes even teenagers exploited these flaws. The lesson? No company is immune, and the root cause is almost always preventable. SQL injection is a critical flaw, not a minor bug. Real-world breaches prove the stakes are high. The good news? SQL injection is preventable. Never trust user input. Always treat it as potentially dangerous. Use prepared statements, parameterized queries, so user data is never mixed directly into SQL commands. With prepared statements, even malicious input is treated as harmless text. Validate all input. Check that it matches the expected format before it reaches the database. Apply the principle of least privilege. Give the database account only the permissions it needs. If an attacker gets in, limited permissions reduce the damage. These simple steps, prepared statements, input validation, and least privilege, form a strong defense. Secure coding isn't optional, it's essential. Protecting your data starts with these basics. Don't leave the door open. Security isn't a one-time fix, it's an ongoing process. Keep all software up to date, servers, frameworks, and plugins. Regularly audit your site and run penetration tests to find vulnerabilities before attackers do. Use a web application firewall, WAF, to block common attacks, including SQL injection. Monitor logs for unusual activity and set up alerts for suspicious behavior. If a breach happens, logs help you understand and respond quickly. Security is about constant attention, not just initial setup. The threat landscape changes daily, so must your defenses. Vigilance is your best protection. Technology alone isn't enough. People are the final line of defense. Developers must be trained in secure coding and use defensive techniques by default. Security should be part of the company culture, not an afterthought. Everyone with back-end access, admins, support, content managers, needs security awareness. Attackers exploit both technical flaws and human mistakes. Adopt a zero-trust mindset. Verify everything. Trust nothing by default. Security is a shared responsibility across the organization. Understanding attacks like SQL injection empowers everyone to defend against them. Protecting data is a fundamental duty in the digital world. Stay alert, stay educated, and make security a habit.